Hello and welcome. I am Dr. Lara May, a clinical pharmacist specializing in functional medicine, as well as a certified yoga teacher and Reiki master. I run a truly integrative health coaching practice encompassing functional medicine lab testing, yoga and meditation, and a sprinkling of Reiki energy medicine. Join me here on Light Body Radio to break through your health plateau and come into alignment with your natural vitality. Hello and welcome everyone to another episode of Light Body Radio. And we have a special guest today. David Krantz is back with us. Welcome, welcome.
Thank you. It's good to be back.
Today we're going to talk about cannabis and CBD and the difference and how they're used in treatment and how you as the consumer might optimize your approach to both of them. So, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, like you said, my name's David Krantz and I'm an epigenetic coach. And that means that I help people understand how to create optimal genetic expression by putting the right foods in their bodies and putting the right, using the right supplements and really matching all of the things that we do with our genetics. And so I do genetic analyses and help people just really understand their bodies at these very fine granular layers, and then figure out, what are the things that really are going to create health for you as an individual, because your body is different than everyone else's body, and then we can look at these small differences and figure that out. And I've been applying the same lens to cannabis and looking at why people respond differently to THC and CBD. And over the past couple of years, I've developed a genetic test with my friends at Apeiron Genomics and have put together a practitioner training for other coaches and doctors and therapists that want to learn how to do genetic analysis to understand, why is it that some people respond really well to THC and why is it that some people, don't? And also, we can talk about all the different things you can learn, but I've been really diving into the research on, what you can learn about your body through genetics and then how to use it to optimize cannabis use.
Awesome. So just for if maybe someone's just starting to get curious and start to explore, what would be some differences of use between cannabis versus CBD?
Okay, sure. So CBD is one of the cannabinoids that's in cannabis. And the cannabis plant produces these chemicals, these compounds that we call cannabinoids. And they're all shaped pretty similarly, but they have slightly different functions. And the one that people are most familiar with is probably THC, which is the psychoactive component. That's what gets you high when you smoke or ingest cannabis. And CBD is another cannabinoid that has really become popular in the past 5 years or so, and it's not psychoactive. Does not produce a high. You get maybe some very minor shifts in the way you're feeling subjectively, but it has some pretty potent effects on the body and the way that it impacts the endocannabinoid system. So CBD as opposed to THC is going to be, people use it more for sleep and anxiety and pain. And it has a very broad range of different uses. And it's almost kind of absurd sometimes when you look at all of the things that people say they've used CBD for. It's like, throw a dart at a list of symptoms and someone has used CBD for it, and that actually creates a lot of skepticism, right, from people, because they're like, how can this be this miracle magic cure thing? Like, this must be a joke. But it's because the endocannabinoid system is so pervasive in the body. Every single system in the body is connected to it, and we can go a little bit more in depth. And we can also talk a little bit more about why, it does work for some people for some things and actually not work for other people for those same things. And so this is one of the reasons why, people, might be skeptical, or it's not so clear like when and how it works for who, is because people's bodies are different, and one person might need to balance their endocannabinoid system in one way, and another person might need to balance it in another way. So we can dive into all that. Does that kind of answer your question on the CBD piece?
Yeah, yeah. So I think maybe a next good place to go to is with the endocannabinoid system and where all those fun receptors are, because they
Mhm.
are almost, I think, ubiquitous would not be an exaggeration throughout our body. But there are, I feel like, some specific organ systems that we can focus on to help give people a better idea, like the liver and the gut. And
Yeah,
so, yeah, let's go there, because I think that's something too that is becoming more like there's more and more awareness coming to it with even just the consumer about, oh, I need to be more aware of my gut health, or I'm healing my gut, or I have gut inflammation, blah, blah, blah. And or similarly, my liver is inflamed. I've been told my liver is inflamed. How is that going to affect all this?
right. So ubiquitous is not an overstatement. Ubiquitous is a pretty, apt way to describe, how the endocannabinoid system fits in to the rest of our body. And when we're talking about the endocannabinoid system, let's just define what that is. So we have these receptors in our body that are designed to match up with cannabinoids. They are what the THC binds to and interacts with, and we also create our own cannabinoids in our body, and they serve as these regulatory chemicals or compounds, in the body. And so we're actually primed to work with cannabinoids. And you can think about it in that both humans and the cannabis plant co-evolved together. And
Yeah.
there was likely even a common ancestor between both of us that, created a similar structure. And so, we're able to receive these cannabinoids from the plant, but we also create our own naturally without any, cannabis from, or cannabinoids
Like an
from
outside
external
source.
from
Yeah.
outsourced sources. And
Yeah.
that's an really important thing for people to become aware of, is that your body is filled with cannabinoids on their
Hmm.
own. They don't necessarily get you high, but some of them actually do really influence mood and
Hmm.
influence emotion and stress. And when we talk about this system being ubiquitous, what they've found is pretty much every single cell in the human body has cannabinoid receptors on it. There is almost nowhere in the body where this is not touching and interacting. And you can almost think of it as this messenger system between different systems in the body. So, and when I'm talking about these systems, I'm might talk about how the musculoskeletal system talks to the immune system, or how the
Hmm.
immune system talks to the nervous system, or how the cardiovascular system talks to other systems in the body. And the cannabinoid system is this really efficient messenger system, and it regulates things. It actually helps your synapses when you transmit neurotransmitters from one synapse to another. The cannabinoid system is absolutely instrumental in shutting down that response, so it's not over transmitting or under
Hmm.
transmitting.
Hmm.
There's kind of like a adaptogen balancing effect from having the right amount of cannabinoids and cannabinoid receptors. And when you look at how ubiquitous this is, how spread throughout the body it is, that's one of the reasons why people can use these things for so many different conditions. Because say someone is low in cannabis or cannabinoid activation in their immune system, well, adding some CBD or THC in might be the thing that really balances out that system and reduces inflammation.
Right.
Or you might have someone that has difficulty sleeping because of the way that their brain waves are firing when they're trying to go to sleep. Maybe they have excess beta waves and there's excess anxiety. And for that person, adding the right amount of cannabinoids in might actually calm the brain down and help them sleep. Now, I will say that there is this aspect of balance. You can actually have too little or too much cannabinoid activation. And so that's why it's really not a one size fits all. For the research really suggests that, there are certain conditions that are associated with too many cannabinoids in the body, and ones that are, kind of the opposite. So this is one of the reasons I think that, some people can try CBD, not experience that many effects. And there's some other reasons we'll look at as well
Mm-hmm.
related to liver metabolism. Um, but at the same time, it's the reason why some people can have profound effects from using these compounds, because it's adding something into their body that they're deficient in.
Yeah, I think it's important, even just so you've sort of alluded to it already, but that we reinforce the concept of our body functions almost like maybe like a choir, where it's an ensemble. It is not
Hmm.
just, a soloist singing one thing, and it's not each organ system operating in a vacuum. It is, we are connected, and I feel like, again, it's something that I feel like there's more of an awareness to, especially with integrative medicine becoming more in the forefront, and with epigenetics and, all of these awesome, amazing things and information. But Western medicine still, for the most part, sort of perpetuates this idea that, oh, if you have a liver dysfunction, then we're just going to look at the liver, or
Right.
if your brain's not operating properly, we're just going to look at your brain. And so I think it's important for us to sort of reinforce that this is a song with many parts, and it's always moving and interconnecting and talking to each other. And so you can't really just, like ingest one thing and expect it to just have one effect.
Exactly. I love that metaphor. And you might even go a step further and say that, if this is a chorus or a song or a symphony that's being played by many different parts, cannabinoids can sometimes help get those parts synced up together.
Yeah.
If the oboe is playing a little bit behind, and like the clarinet's a little bit ahead in the
Right.
symphony, you can look at cannabinoids as kind of a conductor that they can follow a little bit better and
Yeah.
help synchronize those things. And so
Yeah.
it's again, if someone's body's already pretty well synchronized, it may not have that much of an effect. But if there's a piece that's lagging behind and not in communication, not having this nice harmony, with other parts of the body,
Hmm.
then these things can be pretty helpful.
Yeah. And so from here, I want to transition into talking about the specific liver enzymes and why, you know, uh, the dosage might be so important. And I just had a conversation with a colleague of mine, and we were talking about the importance of, medication therapy management from the pharmacist
Hmm.
aspect in the hospital. And we are actually finding, the more research that we do, it's not necessarily patient adherence, which is how closely they take their medication as directed, but a lot of the issues that we are finding are actually underdosing or not optimally dosing. And there's a lot of pharmacogenetic implications with that I think we're just now starting to scratch the surface of. So I wanted to talk about that piece with the cannabis and the CBD, and sort of bring more awareness to consumers about why, they might buy a bottle that's only 100 milligram total versus a one that's like 1 gram total, and why that's different for them.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I just want to, and we'll dive into that in a second, but I'm really glad you're looking into those dynamics with underdosing or not using optimal dosing, because it's like almost every medication is going to have those metabolic differences in the body. And when you look at what is reimbursable by insurance or standard practice of care, it's all based on what's the cheapest.
Mhm.
It's all people deciding, hey, can we get away with not using optimal dosing if it doesn't cost us money in the long run? And it has nothing to do with actual patient care. And so,
No, yeah, I mean, there's even like guideline based therapy, which we do a lot of, and there's reimbursement associated with that. But even that is the way they designed those studies to come up with those guidelines. They did not look at people's DNA and
uh
their, their enzymatic structure and activation and all that good stuff. So,
right, exactly.
yeah.
Yeah. It's a major missing component. And so, what we're talking about here is these liver enzymes, and these are largely in the system, and that's called the Cytochrome P450 system. And this is a number of different genes that create these liver enzymes that break down different compounds and substances. There's a bunch of different ones, and they're all shaped a little differently and are responsible for different classes of medications. And they break down things that you eat as well, like caffeine and um, compounds from herbs and other foods. But because of genetic differences, people can produce very different amounts of these enzymes. Sometimes, tenfold differences or more between the way someone is going to break down a substance versus someone else. And that means that, for example, if person A has a slow liver metabolism for THC, and this happens in a liver enzyme called CYP2C9, and person B has a fast liver metabolism of THC. Well, if they both take a 10 milligram edible, then person A is going to feel it way stronger than person B because they're not breaking it down fully. It's staying in their bloodstream, and person B is breaking it down really quickly, and it's not quite as impactful. And you see this across the range of different medications. And this is what I've been working on, with the test I developed to help people really be able to pin this down. And with CBD, it's even, I think, even more helpful because you don't have the subjective effects to go on. With THC, you can know if you're too high or you didn't get high at all. But with CBD, it's a little bit more of a black box because you can't really gauge it. You just have to look at how the symptoms change over time. And one of the big benefits that I've seen for people using this test is people that have tried CBD once before, like you said, maybe they went out and got a bottle of 100 milligrams and, were using small amounts, 5, 10 milligrams. And we do their genetics and find out that they're a fast or ultra fast metabolizer. And that's just a way low dose for those people. And then they go back and, try, 30, 50 milligrams or whatever the higher dosage range is at a time. And all of a sudden, like, they're getting the results they wanted to get. And so, it's really a matter of understanding how is your body tuned to respond to these substances and being able to match the right optimal dosage with your body. And so, this is really the next generation of personalized, kind of customized care and utilization of medicines, regardless of if they're pharmaceuticals or if they're plant compounds. Our bodies are different, and having some information about that can be profoundly helpful for fine tuning the right amount.
Oh yeah, so helpful. I mean, even, yes, medications, supplements, but even something as simple as like how your body metabolizes or assimilates B vitamins.
Mm-hmm.
And, I don't think a lot of people understand too the role of B vitamins in the body. So they are cofactors, meaning they are a required piece for a chemical reaction to take place, an essential chemical reaction to take place. And there's many of them. But if you don't have enough, then that reaction is not going to take place. Or if your body metabolizes it differently or doesn't, if you have, I'm sure some people have heard of the MTHFR SNP or the different COMT SNPs that can affect, your methylation, your detox pathways, all of these things, then it can create such a profound variance in what we would consider normal. And I'm using that word air quotes and that word in air quotes, but I don't think there really is such a thing as normal. And I think that's why we do need to go to more of a personalized approach to really help people really fine tune their own health with something as simple as, even the vitamins that they take.
Right, exactly. And that's a lot of the work I do with people, is looking at each one of the vitamins and giving people an understanding of, hey, is this something that you need more of or less of? And what specific forms are your body gonna, work well with? And like when you look at something like B12, there's so many different pathways you have to take into account. A lot of people will just look at MTHFR, and that's just a very small piece of the picture.
Mm-hmm.
There's the TCN genes, the transcobalamin transporters that are going to help B12 actually get into the cell. There's this, and talking about gut health, there's this gene called FUT2 that has to do with actually how your body creates blood group antigen markers that live on the surface of mucosal lining,
Mm-hmm.
and it changes the gut balance for people that are what they call non-secretors of FUT2, and those people tend to have elevated B12 levels, and people that are secretors tend to have lower B12 levels because of the way that the gut microbiome uses and excretes B12. So you got to look at all of these different pieces together, and then look at, you know, how B12 fits into the choline cycle, and it's like it's this beautiful symphony, right? It's how
Oh
all
yeah.
these pieces fit together. And so, you know, I guess I'm saying this because I think a lot of people kind of oversimplify you know, what genes are being looked at.
Yes.
And you know, as someone who's been doing this for a while, it's like I know I'm only looking at a small sliver of it, and yet I think I'm looking at more pieces than most people do.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, and I think some have gotten definitely more airtime depending on, which books they read or in
Hmm.
podcasts and those sorts of things. And I do think there are some that have, like our detox pathways, which are so important on so many different levels. And so, but yeah, so we're also learning more and more and more, faster and faster and faster. And so that's why I think it's so important to have people like you that are experts in the field, helping educate people like me that like know a little bit about it, but want to know more. And like those, like, where do we go to find those reliable people with the reliable information that we can trust to then bring to our patients and our clients?
Yeah, well, I appreciate you kind of tagging me as a reliable person. It's always nice to hear that feedback. But yeah, that's why I've put out this the Canna DNA practitioner course. Basically, what I did is went through the literature, pulled every single study I could find that exists on cannabis nutrigenetics and individual genetic variations, and just put it all in one place. Because this is what I found when I started looking into this: is that there was not accessible information. You really had to just go through PubMed, do your own research, you know, create these
Right.
lists. And so that's what I went ahead and did, is just, you know, create the list, create the resources,
Mm-hmm.
and kind of, you know, I like acting as a translator, right? Like I'm going to try and
Oh yeah.
translate as much scientific jargon as I can to be able to be usable by people
Yeah.
who, you know, are not as hyper focused and geeky as I can be when I get into a project like that. It's like I see, you know, my role as someone who can take advantage of I guess my obsessive nature and kind of just build out these things that make it a little bit easier to use this stuff for people.
Yeah, awesome. So if we like as a consumer that maybe I haven't done my DNA testing yet,
Hmm.
where would you recommend that I go?
Hmm.
Because there's a lot more options. It used to excuse me, it used to be just 23andMe, and now there's more. So what would you suggest?
Yeah, so I'm really partial to the company that I work with, Apeiron Genomics. We have a test that is based on 23andMe's test. And so we took all the SNPs that were in their version 4 test, which is the one they ran from 2013 to 2018. And a lot of people don't know this, but in late 2018, they actually changed their chip, and they got rid of a lot of the really important health SNPs that can be useful to look at. And so I think the current 23andMe is almost next to useless if you're really trying to do health investigation stuff for yourself.
Okay.
Um,
So
yeah,
version 4 is
version
like
4.
it. Yeah, if you've already done it, then
If you've
that's the
done it,
one that to the raw data that you want to sort of hold
yeah,
on to. Yeah.
yeah. If you have the version 4, like it's a pretty good test. I'm really partial to the Apeiron test because we do it through a private lab. You own your data, and that's another issue with 23andMe is they own your data technically, and they license it and sell it to other companies who are doing research, and you don't get any, you know, nothing from it.
Yeah.
So, you know, with our test, you own your data. We're really concerned about privacy and really making sure that you know, you're in charge of your data. We have no rights to it. Um, and I love that test because it's built on the version 4, but then we've added a couple, about 100,000 or so extra SNPs
A
that you,
couple versus 100,000. I like
right. Yeah.
that.
Yeah. Yeah. And so it's pretty useful as far as really looking into the health dynamics. and it works really well with the Apeiron test that I like to run, as well as the Canna DNA test that I developed. And it also actually it's in the same, and the nice thing is the raw data is in the same format as 23andMe, like the text file itself. So if you want to go and upload it to any of the other third-party services that accept 23andMe,
Hmm.
it will be compatible with those as well. So
Okay, cool.
it's pretty flexible. And as far as I know, it's like the best value for the most amount of health related SNPs that I'm aware of with the privacy.
Awesome. Yeah, I think the privacy is a big thing, and I think it's one of those things, like if you don't read the fine print, then you really have no idea. But this is your DNA, you know. So it's important, I think, to be aware of how that, if like you're submitting it to get information back, but then who are you submitting it to, and how are they using it or
Right.
not? Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean that's 23andMe's business model from the start is we'll give people cheap DNA tests and then sell the data. They don't make a lot of money on the sequencing or anything like that. They're kind of breaking
Hmm.
even on that, but their revenue model is to sell data. So,
Yeah, they're a business, so they got to make money.
mhm.
Okay, so let's say that um, now, so I've got my DNA sequence and I have this information. And so as a consumer, if I were the one talking to a friend of mine, I would say you need to find a practitioner to work with that knows what they're looking at and knows how to interpret it for you. But are there other, like, maybe like empowering questions that a patient can come to their practitioner with? Or like, what would you suggest, instead of just saying, here it is, now read it back to me? Because I'm, me, I am very much like, I want to empower people to be advocates and be active participants in their own healthcare. And I think it should be a conversation between the practitioner and the patient. I'm not a fan of giving away your power to a practitioner in any field. I don't care if it's integrative functional or Western medicine. So what would you suggest from that perspective?
Right. I love the way you phrase that. Like really using it as something that's going to empower you as the client or the patient to be able to make changes in your life that are positive. And so I use that as a bit of a litmus test. If you get a genetic test back that just gives you predispositions, you're going to have this, you might have this disease or that disease, and there's not really any actionable info, there's not much point to that. Like you
Mm-hmm.
want to be able to work with someone who knows how to look at not just, hey, is this gene or this variant create a higher likelihood of this disease or that disease, but what are the epigenetic environmental triggers or things that contribute to the development of that, and how can you change your lifestyle to really optimize health? And so I would say if someone gets their data back first, I think trying to find a practitioner that's familiar with this information is helpful because it's a very different way of looking at genetic data than lab tests or other things that a lot of practitioners are familiar with.
Mm-hmm.
And you really want to find someone that has good training and like really advertises this as a specialty.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen a lot of horror stories of people just bringing genetic tests to their doctors who don't know how to look at this stuff. And I think more doctors and practitioners are getting training. But I hate to say it, but you can't expect good guidance from someone who doesn't know how to work with this information specifically, even though they are very smart and intelligent and know how to work with other types of information. So
Yeah.
it's a pretty niche way of looking at the body and a pretty specific mentality and perspective that needs to be in place in order to really empower someone to use this information well. So I would say try and seek someone out who has it as a specialty, and then at the very least try and educate yourself on how to think about it.
Mm-hmm.
There's a my favorite resource probably is self-hacked or self-decode,
Okay.
um, just from a patient perspective. And I will say that I think that um, it can be overwhelming to people to look at some of the information on there. But if you're really
Yeah.
trying to do a deep dive, like it's got very good information. Um, and
What about,
okay.
no, go ahead. Sorry.
I was going to say it. I think they've done some of the best work on aggregating a lot of genetic data in one place and looking at, okay, what are the action items from it. Um, Again, I'm really partial to the Apeiron tests and the reports that I
Hmm.
use, because I think we do a bit of a better job making it simultaneously easy to understand and in
Hmm.
depth. Like there's this kind of balancing act you see in the genetic testing world where some people way oversimplify and you miss the fine details in order to give people, direct to consumer reports that just like don't really have a lot of teeth. You see that with 23andMe's health
Oh yeah,
reports,
yeah.
you know.
That I think I did 23andMe several years ago, and I think that was like the biggest disappointment when they actually, gave me my results. I was like, really? This is how you're reporting this out?
Right.
So I was like, oh. So I immediately went and downloaded my raw data. I'm like, all right, I got to find something better than this.
Right.
Like,
Yeah,
I'm glad I
exactly.
did it to have the raw data, but now,
Yeah, it's totally milk
yeah,
toast and unimpressive.
yeah.
but but then you get things on the other end of the spectrum, where you're like Promethease or self-hack might fall into this category as well a little bit, but it's so complex and there's so much conflicting information where you're looking at this SNP codes for a decreased in likelihood of this, and this one codes for an increased likelihood, and you have to see like 10 SNPs in a row that all just have this like I don't you don't know how to make sense of it.
Right. Yeah.
um and so that's why I like the Apeiron reports. I like the way the Apeiron trained coaches tend to work with clients, because it's a matter of translation. It's like looking at, okay, how do these things actually balance out? How do they relate to what's going on in your body now?
Yeah,
And
exactly.
how do they relate to your goals? And then let's, look at the priorities here. Like, what are the things that, out of these 500 SNPs we're looking at, what are the top couple of things that are going to move the needle and actually get you towards where you want to be? So that's
Yeah.
where I see the role as the practitioner, is to help filter that information and, simplify it in a way that still has the detail in mind.
Yeah, so I think as a patient or consumer, it's important to be aware of what your goals are when you come to. So you're like, okay, I did this testing. So also, get clear on your symptomology, what's going on with you, and where do you want to go from where you are now?
Yes.
And because that's such an important piece, is again, this is not happening in a vacuum. And yes, your DNA has this structure. That's essentially what the report is telling you. This is your structure, and then it'll translate out to different enzymatic reactions in your body. But you need to correlate that with how are you feeling? What happens when you eat certain things, or what happens when, are you sleeping or you're not sleeping? All of the things. And so, and
Exactly.
really creating that that visual and that I don't know what I'm missing a word right now, but you know what I mean. Maybe the
That
symphony,
map.
the map, the symphony, the whole, the big picture.
Right. And the important thing to keep in mind too is that the map is not the territory. That you can have a really good map, but if you don't know how it's actually translating to what's on the ground, then it's still just, kind of this abstract thing. And, this is the reason why that looking at genetics is very different from looking at, say, a lab test, because genetics give you probability. You can have someone with the same MTHFR variant, and one might be expressing, poor methylation, and the other one might not be because of a lot of other factors. And so part of the role of the practitioner is to assess that, right? Or part of the role of like you as a patient is to know, like, or is to figure out, like, is this something that I should be concerned about or not? Because I can't tell you
Hmm.
how many people will come to me and go, I've got the MTHFR mutation, which we can talk a little bit about why mutation is not a good way to talk about this.
Yeah.
And people get scared and have a lot of fear, and that has nothing to do with what's going on for them. But they've
Yeah.
seen it online, they've seen people talk about it, and they get in their head that that's the problem. And, based on their goals and their symptoms, it's really not a big deal for them. And
Yeah.
so, the being able to match the genetics, like you said, the structure with the epigenetics, how things are interacting with that structure to create health, or disease or whatever is going on for you. That's the magic. It's
Mm-hmm.
matching the genetics with the epigenetics and the environmental inputs into your body that create the disease. And there's a saying that genetics load the gun and epigenetics pulls the trigger. It's the
Mm-hmm.
genetics that's going to create the conditions for things to manifest or not, and then it's the environment and what you do with your body that actually makes things a reality or not. And
Yeah.
so the using the genetics as this guide to be able to say, what are the things that I want to have in my life or avoid in my life, like that's where the magic is. It's not just knowing, hey, I've got this gene or I've got this SNP. It's knowing really what to do with it.
Right. Um, yeah, we are not a victim of our genes. And I
Right.
think that's still a concept that's perpetuated in Western medicine a lot. And I think especially when we look at the oncology side of things,
Hmm.
cancer
Hmm.
medicine. And so it's something that I reinforce with my patients a lot. You are not a victim of your genes. You have power. You can change your behavior, change what you do, and it will change the expression of what's happening. And so, and even sometimes reminding my contemporary practitioners of that, just to help them look at things a little bit differently when they're designing treatment regimens and that sort of thing. Is let's start looking at it from an empowered perspective, not a powerless, victimized perspective. um,
Exactly. And maybe
yeah.
we want to use a specific example here. One of the most well-studied genes is this gene called ApoE that is related to Alzheimer's and dementia risk. And there's a specific variant of this that when you look at the population, I mean, it's a pretty strong risk factor for developing it. It's, some people with this variant, people can have an 8 to 10 times risk higher than the average of developing dementia. Yet, not everyone with that gene variant develops dementia. And what has come out of the research is that it's lifestyle that really makes that difference. When people eat a diet that's low in saturated fat and exercise regularly, their risk of dementia goes down to the average with that gene variant.
Mm.
On the flip side, people that have that gene variant and tend to eat a kind of standard American diet and don't get a lot of movement, well, that's what actually elevates the risk in combination with that variant.
Mm-hmm.
So again, it's the interaction between the genes and lifestyle that really matters more than your genes. It really matters what you do way
Mm-hmm.
more than what genes you have. And yet it still really matters what genes you have because you need to know what you should be doing.
Yes, yes, absolutely. All right, so let's wrap things up. And on that note of empowerment, where can people go to really start making those decisions for themselves? So we've already talked about your preferred testing resource. Are there any other resources, books? Like, what do you feel about the book Dirty Genes? Do you feel like that's a good introduction? Are you familiar with the book, or do you feel like that's one of those culprits where it's like, ooh, too
Yeah.
general and
Well, I don't know. I feel like, I like some of what Ben Lynch does, but I have to say, like, I still don't like the framing of dirty genes. Like it's this you have bad genes
oh yes, with the
mentality.
mutation. Yeah, you alluded to
Right.
that
It,
earlier.
it
Yes.
it still
Yeah.
feels like there's this fear-based thing embedded within it. I think
Yeah.
a lot of the information is good, but I don't think that it creates an empowered perspective for people. People that I tend to find coming from his world have this very frantic, fear-based, like there's something wrong with me mentality, and
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it serves people. But at the same time, I think the information's pretty good. Um, Again, I'll just name self-hacked
Okay.
as
Let's
the
stick with
website.
that. All right.
If people want to do the research, like I think they're very balanced. I think they do a good job of like it's super deep. Like if you want to find something and how genetics are related to it, like go look it up there.
Okay.
Um, in terms of resources, I've also got some articles you can read on my site.
Okay.
Um,
Yeah, we can link to those in the show notes for sure.
mhm.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I wish I had a book off the top of my head, but nothing's coming right
That's
now.
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because I do feel like, especially being both a practitioner and a consumer myself within this realm, is that I feel like the information is almost too simplified, oversimplified, or way, way, way complicated, which is like very geared towards the practitioner,
Hmm.
or, you know, like again, like fear-based with these are quote what could be wrong with you aspects, which
Right.
is you know, what we want to get away from. So awesome. Are you, with this new training program, are you also compiling maybe a list of practitioners that people can go to that have completed, or is that something maybe you think you might do in the future, is as people complete your training, like maybe start compiling a resource list so that people can like maybe find practitioners in their area? Or
Yeah, well, we do have a listing on the Appear On Coaches site, and it will
oh,
say
okay.
Can a DNA certified coach for the ones that
Okay,
have
cool.
finished the training. So, there's a general Appear On training that does lifestyle epigenetics and nutrition, and then we're adding the coaches that have completed the Can a DNA on there as well. So, people can go
Awesome.
there and look at providers, or they can get in contact with me, and if they want to run one of those tests as well.
Awesome. Okay. Anything else before we finish up that you feel like needs to be said, discussed, or brought attention to, or anything else that's like a burning desire?
I don't think so. I mean, we covered a
Okay.
lot, and I just
Yeah.
really appreciate your perspective, and feels like we're very aligned in terms of, what is like the way to use this information for empowerment, for really allowing someone to know their body and have both self-awareness and actionable stuff to do. And
Yeah.
and I have to say too, like, a lot of people look at genetics as something very complicated, and it is complex, and yet a lot of the recommendations that come out of it can be very simple.
Oh,
Sometimes
yeah.
it can be just making a small tweak here, small tweak there, that makes a big difference for people. And so, I think maybe what I'll leave people with is like, um, it can be overwhelming depending on what information you're looking at,
Hmm.
but maybe you use that as a little bit of a benchmark to where if it feels overwhelming, take a step back and see if you can find someone to help you kind of interpret it and work with.
Right. Yeah. Because regardless of where you go to submit your information and get your raw data back, you will be given a report of some sort. So it will give you some sort of baseline information to go from. And the detail that is involved in that will vary based on which route you choose. But yes, like don't get discouraged and don't run straight to the fear place. you know,
Right.
like remember that this is a time of unprecedented resources. And while it can be information overwhelm, it can also be so powerful and so empowering to know that, okay, I have this information. Now I just need someone to help me navigate through it. Where can we find you? So let's go there.
Okay, great. So my website is david-krantz.com, david-krantz.com. And anyone that's interested in doing some work together or figuring out if we're a good fit, you can book a free 30-minute consult or just send me a message, and we'll see what we can do.
Awesome. Great. Well, thank you so much. And we are going to have you back for a complete series. And I think our next episode, we're going to dive into some psychedelics, right? Yep.
Excellent. Well, I really
Yep.
look forward to that.
Yes, me too. All right. So thank you again for being here.